Brandon Zimmerman's bold predictions. We've heard number one. We go to number two. What do you got, Brandon?
Number two, this one may shock some, but he's another guy that I was huge on all year last year. Kind of sits back, is really, if you ask most Buckeyes, probably they would consider him the fourth best at his position. But I think Jalen Holmes will lead the Buckeyes in sacks next year. He sits behind guys like Tyquan Lewis, Sam Hubbard, Nick Bosa, who everyone thinks are their big-time guys. But Jalen Holmes last year was a dominant force when he was in there. I think he only wound up with 2 sacks, but there were so many more times where he was just a half second too late. And I think this year Jalen Holmes is really going to become a force on the defensive line. He's not going to be the forgotten guy this year. And I see, a few other people are kind of jumping on this too. And I think Jalen Holmes will lead the Buckeyes in sacks next year.
Sack totals can be difficult. It's not necessarily the best pass rusher. It typically is. If you get the most sacks, you can kind of extrapolate that if somebody gets to the quarterback 10 or 12 times a year, that they've also pressured him another proportionate of times that's more than the guy that got 3 or 4 sacks. That's typically the case. But like you mentioned, Jalen Holmes was a force more than just a few times last season. 9 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, should improve upon that. And as we mentioned with talking about Jerome Baker earlier, he should qualify as a guy who's not going to get the kind of Joey Bosa treatment, who went from like 12 or 13 sacks, something in that range, maybe more than that.
Yeah.
His sophomore season, and then took a tumble and was just as effective, just as dominant, tying up blockers, had a ton of tackles for loss that last season in Columbus, but the sack total went way down, and Joey Bosa was off the charts, and the NFL scouts saw it as well.
And that is what was always funny, because he did drop down in his junior year. I think he wound up like 5.5 sacks or something, and everyone thought that he had this major drop off. But when you actually watch the games, Bosa was being a triple team, and he was still a force with all 3 guys on him, and it led to guys like Tyquan Lewis lead the team in sacks because they're going one-on-one and Bosa's on 3 people. So yeah, you're right, sacks are misleading, and I think they aren't. Yeah, and they aren't the only stat that makes somebody a dominant defensive end, which I think is the case with Jalen Holmes last year, where he was a lot more dominant than any stats show for people that watch the game. And I think next year it's, he's going to get a better chance, I think, because Nick Bosa has another year of growing. Sam Hubbard has another year of growing at the defensive end spot. And with Lewis coming back, he's kind of the forgotten guy. And I think he's going to be left one-on-one quite a bit and be able to wreak some havoc.